Hello, I'm Tom Owen, an archivist at the University of Louisville. Welcome to a new video series supported by the University of Louisville and the Frazier History Museum called Remnants with Tom Owen. Today we're going to be focused on telling the story of the building that the Frazier History Museum now occupies at 829 West Main. Now that's where Roy Wilkins Boulevard connects to 9th Street here in historical West Main. I think you might know it as the entrance to the expressway off of Main Street. So that massive building is the story we're telling today. Here on Main Street from the 1850s, here around 9th Street, it was known as the Breaks. Now what that means is that it was the bustling center of Louisville's tobacco trade. The street during the tobacco auctioning season, with several of the tobacco houses, the auction houses located in this immediate area. The street would be full of wagons with round barrels that had been pressed full with cured tobacco ready for sale and to be made into plug tobacco and cigarettes and, more importantly, in the 19th century, cigars. But the building that stood on this corner, the 9th Street Auction House, and many other buildings in this immediate area were wiped out on March the 27th, 1890, by a gigantic tornado that hit Louisville, bounced off of southern Indiana, and knocked the water tower down on Zorn Avenue. That whirling tiger of the air, it was called, reduced this part of Main Street into ruins. In fact, a map that was created 2 years after the tornado described the site where the Frazier Museum now stands as a ruins tumbling down. New construction occurred on this corner 8 years later in 1898. When a very wealthy tobacco merchant and manufacturer by the name of John Dorhofer hired a very popular Louisville architect, D.X. Murphy, to design this large building on the corner. Murphy, you might note, was the architectural firm that did the twin spires at Churchill Downs. And it appears to me that Murphy loved towers with a cupola on top and a flagpole on top, as you see in the twin spires. And indeed, the building that Dorhofer commissioned with D.X. Murphy uses from the second floor a tower with a cupola on top and a flagpole standing. So the building was built in 1898. And it was known as John Dorhofer's building. But note, though it looks like, historically, a single building with cast iron features and brick and stone, in fact, it was a series of bays or store fronts, warehouse fronts that existed with 5 business addresses. And so there would have been multiple businesses historically in the single building. But that's not the piece of the use of the building that I want to emphasize. From the earliest days, there were fabric manufacturers, clothing manufacturers, all around Main Street in Louisville. And indeed, from the earliest days of the use of the building, there was a garment manufacturer that made corduroy pants called Ox Breeches. Ox Breeches was located in the upper floors of the building. And they made a corduroy heavy-duty pants that was popular around the nation. In fact, at one point, there were 300 or so young women operating sewing machines in the building. Sadly, in 1905, there was a significant and prolonged strike, And indeed, the owners ultimately broke the back of the union organizing effort, and new employees returned to the sewing machine. Oxbreech's years of use of the building ended abruptly in a devastating fire in several bays of the building. In fact, one bay, one section of the building, was destroyed and never returned. And today, that's the entrance atrium and courtyard where you enter the Frazier History Museum. But then there were other garment manufacturers in the building all through the 1920s and well into the 1930s. Now, the warehouse use continued and ultimately dominated the use of the building in the late 1930s through the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even the 1970s. While variously there was a warehouse for a furniture supplier, there was a seed company, there was a whiskey distributor, there were multiple warehouse and suppliers here in the building, but the one that dominated in the corner bay was a supplier of baking supplies for bakeries in town, as well as ice cream makers. And during this period, guess what happened? The cupola disappeared off of the building and was no more until later. A new vision occurred for the building in the 1980s and into the 1990s. Two owners of the building, one who sold upscale Scandinavian furniture and another who made custom-made hardware, metal hardware for decorative purposes, they decided to rebrand the building as the Louisville Design Center. Now here's the vision. They believed if you brought landscape architects, interior designers, and even had space for art galleries and even offices, and then the ultimate vision was to have starving artists gallery space as well as studio space, and maybe even a place for a starving artist to sleep. During that time, in the late 1980s into the 1990s, the famous Louisville graphic designer Julius Friedman had a gallery in the building called Images. And popular around town, the Louisville Design Center existed during the 1980s and the 1990s. In 2004, local distiller Owsley Brown Frazier opened a museum, the Frazier History Museum, and its purpose was to exhibit his personal collection of armaments and related artifacts. But then over the decades, the focus mission of the Frazier History Museum narrowed to Kentucky, our characters, our history, our culture. And today, this museum is where the world meets our Commonwealth of Kentucky. Now, if these walls could talk since the construction of the building in 1898, they would remind us of the garment manufacturing that went on in the building. They would remind us of that bitter strike in 1905, or the fire, destructive fire in 1915. They would remind us of the multiple uses of bulk warehousing. There's a lot to tell. And they would remind us of the Frazier History Museum that's been here since 2004. You have been watching Remnants with Tom Owen, a joint video production of the Frazier History Museum and the University of Louisville. See you next time.